I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're stepping back in time with Laura Gutman. She's the author of a terrific book. It is called Army Life, World War II. This deeply personal memoir offers a child's eye view of military life during one of history's most defining conflicts, highlighting the resilience and sacrifices of military families. From Pearl Harbor to her father's combat assignments, Laura's story is both a heartfelt tribute and a fascinating glimpse into life on the home front during World War II. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put her in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her wonderful book. The links are below this interview. Laura, great to see you here today on Spotlight. Thank you
You,
so much for
Logan.
joining me.
Thank you. It's my pleasure altogether.
It's
Thank you.
my pleasure to have you on the show. Tell us what inspired you to go down memory lane and write down your memories from that time long ago, growing up with your mom and dad and all that.
Yeah, it sort of came to pass, interestingly. My husband and I had been talking about how our lives had been in a somewhat more deep way than we usually did. And but before that, something like a gift from heaven had happened. Our life as a military family during World War II was extremely chaotic. We were constantly moving, constantly. By the time I was 16, I had lived in 20 different places. And that's, that's the literal truth. So we were all over the place. So our possessions were, who knew where they were? So many, many decades later, my brother, who lives in San Diego on the other side of the coast from me, and I were talking. We talked about these issues a fair amount, actually. And he said, Lori, I have a Foot Locker in my garage. I have no idea how it got there. I don't remember anything about it. There it is. I've actually never opened it. Maybe I should open it. And I said, well, it's family archaeology. I think you're going to find, used towels, old sheets, some broken glasses. I mean,
Right.
I don't think anything, but it is family archaeology. So yeah, I think you should open it. So lo and behold, it was my childhood scrapbook that I
Wow.
had kept. It had a huge amount of material in it, and I kept it reasonably assiduously between the age of about 7 and 16. I last saw it when I was 16. When I left for college, that was the last time I'd seen it. And I thought it just disappeared among the family stuff, And so that gave me a platform that I could hang a fair amount of the material on, and it included photographs that I'd taken with my little camera, as well as other pictures from the family. And it included some dates that had become a little fuzzy in my mind. My memory is very crisp and very good, but with the moving around, sometimes I simply lost track. Mhm.
Yep. Amazing. Amazing. So this was like a godsend to find that Foot Locker that had your old scrapbook in it and reminded you of what life was like during that era.
Yeah,
Did you have I was going to say, did you have conversations with your dad about what Army life was like? My dad was a World War II veteran also. I never talked to him about it. I wish I
yeah.
had, but I never did. That's one, your dad was more active because he was in beyond World War II. So it was his career, right?
Yeah, he was career infantry,
Yeah.
career infantry, the queen of the battlefield, so to speak. And I usually knew a lot about what he was doing at the time. We would talk about, in some reasonable depth about what he was doing at work,
Yeah.
his various places. Of course, during the war, he was gone, and we didn't talk about that.
Mm.
And he really didn't talk about that a lot afterward. But
Mhm.
it is the case that we were stationed back in Germany after the war, right directly after the war, we were stationed back there. And we visited some of the battlefields that he had
Wow.
been involved in. And I got a little bit of a sense of how intense that had been for him.
That must have been difficult living in Germany post World War II, right?
It was very terrible for a while. We arrived in 1947, and it was just awful. We were stationed initially outside of Frankfurt in a little town called Höchst, and that was just rubble. It was
Yeah.
just filled with rubble. People were living in bomb craters. Children were hungry. It was dreadful. Things smelled very bad.
Mm,
Globally, my baby brother, who was just an infant at the time, remembers how bad it smelled. Everything.
yeah.
Um, uh, that was an era. We were in Europe between 1947 and 51, and I concluded that we had seen three eras of German transition during the
Mm,
time. I actually gave them a whole name. I said that when we arrived there, that was the first era, and they were panting in the dust, looking at their own annihilation, and they weren't doing anything. There was a little stacking of bricks. That was the only thing I was aware of anybody doing ever
mm,
during that time. Second era was probably started around the time of the Berlin airlift, which was we were there for that and part of that process, and the it changed the dynamic between the American forces and the Germans
mm,
personally greatly. As from the German point of view, they realized that we intended for them to have a capital and not just abandon them to the Russians, which was this is the Cold War was coming on, and that
mhm.
was the threat. From the American point of view, we also, I think, very overtly realized that they were smart, had a terrific work ethic. Everybody always recognized that. Um, uh, and we felt that they could be worthy allies.
Mm.
And so there was that change. And then the last era was, I, I said, from the German point of view, it was like, well, nobody's going to help us. We're going to have to do this. We're going to have
Mm.
to get ourselves back into some kind of situation
Right.
and save ourselves. And those were the three eras that I saw.
Amazing. I don't think people fully realize the sacrifices that the family of the enlisted person make. You know, we
Yeah.
realize the soldier is making a great sacrifice, putting his or her life on the line, but for the families, they're also uprooted constantly, put in dangerous situations sometimes, living in hostile lands, and it's a great service to our country that you guys provided as well. Talk to us a little bit about Pearl Harbor when it was attacked, what you remember, and how it impacted your family.
I was just over the age of 4 when that happened. And as it turned out, we were at Schofield Barracks, and
Mhm.
which is in the center of the island and has a major airfield attached to it, Wheeler Airfield. And our house was right on Wheeler Field. There was a little yard in the back of the house, and there was a little wire fence, and then the airfield. So I was used to seeing, and the planes. This is the back of the airfield where the planes would sit, and I was used to seeing the planes there. So on that day, that morning, I was up and I got to witness the attack on the airfield directly. Pow, bam, lots of explosions going on. What happened after that, Dad was needed very badly quickly back at the mainland to start training troops for the army. I don't think people understand how utterly tiny the pre-war army was. It
Mm.
was only it was in the thousands. We
Wow.
were smaller than the Army of Portugal, the entire US, and that included the Air Force. This was the Army Air Force was included in that number.
Wow.
And so what happened was the US had to quickly train up a powerful army, the one that eventually, of course, took on two huge areas, the war in Europe and the war in the Far East, both.
Yeah.
So Dad, being a West Point graduate and a career officer, a mid-level officer at that point, was essential to
Mm.
the training proposition, and which was one of the reasons that we were moving around so much. So he left immediately. Right after the attack, my mother and I and my baby brother, he's 4 years older, we had friends up on the mountain, so we went to stay with them, assuming that there would be an invasion. Why not? I mean, why else would the Japanese have done that? And we were also aware that there had already been an attack and an invasion in some of the other areas of the Pacific. I think the Philippines, if I'm not wrong about that, but anyway, we knew about that. So we assumed that that was what our fate was, and we awaited it up there. So after that didn't happen, what happened was that Dad left, and he felt that the trip home would be the most dangerous part.
Mm.
So he asked for us to be transported back to the States at
Mm.
the back end of that line. So we stayed until late into the summer and in Hawaii, and then started back. So it uh, I got to watch all my, one by one, our friends leaving, and it was we began to get a sense of what post Pearl Harbor was going to be like. Mhm.
Yeah. What was it like moving so much? You're constantly saying goodbye to friends, meeting new friends,
Yeah,
changing schools. That
yeah.
must have been difficult, or did you just adapt very easily and learn great
No,
people skills?
no,
No, no,
no, no. It was horrible. It
it
was
was.
absolutely terrible. Um, uh, you never get used to it. You Every single time, it's like all your friends suddenly died. It's like it's a mass grave suddenly, and this happens all the time. The problem is that you can't prevent it.
Right.
This is what's going to happen, and you're going to then be in the situation of being a newcomer all over again with no
Mm.
friends. Nobody knows anything about you. It was not so bad when the schools were on an army post and the other kids then knew what was going on
Right.
and understood. But a number of the places that we lived, the school was instead the community school, and very settled communities that had very little experience in army life, and so had no way of knowing why somebody would show up in the middle of the year and things like that. It was bad enough at one point. Probably in fourth grade, I think it was fourth grade. I I couldn't say my name. This went on for
Mm.
rather a while. I was totally incapable. I was mute, and well, that solved itself. But it is very hard. I will say that there are forces in the life of an army brat that are very supportive and moderate some of these things. The fact that we were living in a highly purpose-driven life
Mm.
where we felt with legitimacy that we as children were serving the nation just as our parents were saving the nation, protecting the nation. And we felt that very strongly, that this was an act of patriotism and strength, and that it was important for us to live up to the expectations. It was very important.
Yeah.
So that, I think, strengthened us enormously. We as children, we served the nation. So that is a bridge over a huge amount of the downsides of it. And it gives you a sense of being part of something which is essential to the nation, and that you yourself are in the middle of it, the absolute total middle of it. So I think that when you think about how hard it was very, very hard. But it is those other things that come to your rescue and that make me feel, and which I felt fairly early in my adulthood, that I was very glad and grateful for the way things had turned out, and that I wouldn't trade it for anything. So I think those are the big forces on there.
Amazing. An amazing story. Thank you for your service, because like you said, you served our country as well. We're glad that sense of patriotism helped you through some of those hard times. The name of the book is Army Brat, World War II. It is a deeply personal memoir that offers a child's eye view of military life during one of history's most defining conflicts, highlighting the resilience and sacrifices of military families. Laura, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time and for your candor and all of your insights. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time, this time until next time on Spotlight.